Hey guys, welcome to the first Flip Classroom for Term 3, 2017. We're going to start off just looking a little bit at what biodiversity is at the ecosystem level, but also at the species level and within populations of organisms. The Webster's Dictionary states that biological diversity in an environment is indicated by numbers of different species of plants and animals. The Oxford Dictionary states that it's the variety of plant and animal life in the world or in a particular habitat, a high level of which is usually considered to be important and desirable. And that's really the overarching concept that I would like you guys to understand. So the higher the biodiversity of an ecosystem, generally the more stable it is. In this video we're going to look at the different levels of organisation that are found within an ecosystem, and we're going to start really big. We're going to start with ecosystems as a whole, we're then going to move into communities within an ecosystem, and then the populations within a community, and then also we'll look at some of the different trophic levels from there. Ecosystems include all of the living organisms and all of the non-living features in an environment. So you can imagine an ecosystem as big as you like or as small as you can. Something like the Great Barrier Reef or something like the common veggie patch, which you can see here. Now, all of the living and non-living elements interact with one another in this system. So today we're going to look at my old man's veggie patch. It's not doing too well at the moment due to the immense amount of wind that's copping, but within this ecosystem there are all of the different levels of organisation. So we're going to start by looking at the community. Now, a community is all of the different species of living things within this veggie patch. So you've got some strawberries, we just saw some parsley and then some rosemary, there's some thyme here, some more parsley, we've got some capsicums, there's the odd snail floating around. Every now and again some birds come along and dig some holes, right down to the bacteria and the other decomposers that are living within the soil. Now altogether they represent the community. If we go one step deeper, we move to what's called a population. This is where we focus on one single species existing in a specific place at any one time. And as you can see here, we're looking at a population of snow peas. Yo. Now, one other group of organisms that exists within ecosystems are the decomposers. Decomposers are organisms that feed on dead and decaying material, and they obtain their nutrients from dead plants and dead animals, and also animals' waste. They are extremely essential to the success of an ecosystem as they recycle nutrients back into the soil for plants to use for growth. And without them, dead matter and waste would just pile up everywhere, which is really kind of gross. Some of the examples of decomposers that we've looked at in the past are things like earthworms and fungi, and probably the most useful type of decomposer are the bacteria. Here's an example of a decomposer found near the veggie patch. Yeah, and this guy's a ripper. He just absolutely loves a party. Oh, I've done it again. Oh, sorry about that. How rude of me to eat in front of you. Now, if you think about the names of certain types of ecosystems, right, you're looking at things like savanna woodland and river red gum community, right, barrier reef. Okay, you're looking at the kinds of vegetation that are the most dominant within that ecosystem, and you use that to help you determine the name of an ecosystem. Now, for our ecosystem that we looked at previously, it was the veggie patch. Okay, it's aptly named because the ecosystem itself is dominated by vegetables. Okay, now we're going to talk about the different types of organisms that we can find within a community. And now there's two different ways that organisms can get their essential requirements or their energy. And one of those ways is to to turn inorganic matter into organic matter. Okay? Now what that means is there are types of organisms that can trap light energy from the sun and convert it into chemical energy. Now, we refer to these types of organisms as producers, and the most common types of producers that we come across are plants. Okay? Now plants, what they can do is a chemical reaction called photosynthesis. Okay? And this is where they convert carbon dioxide and water with the help of light energy from the sun into glucose and oxygen, okay, and energy. Now this group of organisms are referred to as autotrophs. Okay, like I said, they have the ability to convert inorganic material into organic material. Now the other group of organisms are heterotrophs, right? And the way they get their nutrients and energy is by feeding on other organisms, right? Now there's three different types of heterotroph. There's what's called a herbivore. Herbivores are organisms that feed directly on producers, and they only feed on producers. Another type of heterotroph is the carnivore. Now a carnivore is a consumer that only feeds on other heterotrophs for its nutrients. It won't feed on producers or anything like that. Okay, it's like you probably have heard many times before, carnivores are essentially meat eaters. Okay, not 100% true, but they do only feed on other heterotrophs. And finally, the third group of heterotrophs. Now they're called omnivores, and they're just like us. Humans are omnivores, and what we do is we feed on autotrophs, so we feed on producers, but we also feed on heterotrophs. Okay, we feed on other consumers. I've got an example of the omnivorous nature of humans right here. Actually, if I look at this beautiful delicious meal that I'm eating, I've got some zucchini, right? Producer, autotroph. Nom 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 nom. And I've also got some chicken, right? A chicken, heterotroph, right? Oh, bellissimo. Now let me get back to my meal before it goes cold. Howdy. Well, now we're going to talk about the different types of interactions between organisms. Now, they can be between organisms of the same species, or they can be between organisms of a different species. Sorry, I don't know where that bloke came from. Now, with organisms within an ecosystem or a community, they interact with each other, and these different interactions can be broken up into three main areas. Now, those areas are competition, predation, and symbiosis. Competition can occur between organisms of the same species and also organisms of different species. Now, organisms, they compete for resources. So things like food, water, oxygen. It could be something like space for a habitat, or even something like light. Now, these competitive interactions are going to be more intense for organisms of the same species and also organisms from very similar species. Now, the reason for that is because essentially, if they're all living in the same sort of ecosystem, then they're going to compete for the exact same resources. Now, I'm an organism, and I'm a very hungry organism most of the time, and I can get quite competitive when I'm really hungry, or hangry even. Now, within the habitat that I live in, my house, there's one thing that I get quite competitive over, and it's this thing here, and I think you'll all agree, it's quite a delicious little treat. The problem with living in an ecosystem where there's a resource like this is that everyone else living in that ecosystem is also actually quite keen on eating a resource like this. Now, this is my chocolate. I found it first, so therefore I should get to eat it all. But that's not always the way it is. What do you mean that's your chocolate? Oh, not this guy again. Now, I also live in this habitat, so it's very important that I get my fair share of that chocolate. Oh, gosh, this guy is annoying. I'm gonna have to deal with him. And that's how it should be. Oh. Now, the second area of interaction is called predation. And essentially, all it is when one organism feeds on or eats another live organism. Now this could be an animal feeding on a plant or eating a plant, or an animal eating another animal, or in some cases it could even be a plant feeding on an animal. And the final type of interaction is symbiosis. Now symbiosis consists of three different interactions within itself, and they are mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Now mutualism is an interaction where both organisms from each species benefit from the relationship. So a good example could be something like the bacteria that exist within the stomach of a cow. Now, cows feed on grass, and grass is made of a structural chemical called cellulose, which is rather hard to break down. What the bacteria actually do is they provide the enzymes required for the breakdown of cellulose. Again, within this relationship, both species are benefiting. Commensalism is an interaction where one species benefits and the other species remains unharmed. Now here's just one example of commensalism. Now myself, I'm an organism, I'm a human, and this is my pillow, right? Now I love my pillow, and I definitely benefit from using it on a daily basis without causing it any harm. But I just feel like my pillow just doesn't love me back. Pillow, oh pillow, you're breaking my heart. Why won't you love me like I love you? Oh, pillow, pillow. Whoa, oh, that got a bit weird. Now the third and final type of symbiosis is parasitism. Now parasitism is where one organism or species benefits and the other organism or species is harmed. Okay, so it involves a type of organism called a parasite. So this could be something like a flea or a mosquito or a tick or lice or something like this. And the other organism is called the host. Well, that's it, guys. Well done. You've made it to the end of our first flipped classroom for Term 3, 2017, Biology. There's a couple of things I'd like you to do before next lesson, next Monday. What I want you to do is I want you to choose an ecosystem at your house or your home or somewhere in your town. Write down an example of that ecosystem, the community, a population within that ecosystem, but I also want you to include an example of at least 2 producers, at least 2 consumers, okay, 1 herbivore, 1 carnivore or omnivore. And I also want you to think of 2 examples of each type of interaction that happens between species. So that's 2 examples of competition, 2 examples of commensalism, and just 2 examples of symbiosis, all within whatever ecosystem it is that you choose. Now your 2 examples of the relationships, you could have one wacky example like I kind of did, and one serious one, but that's up to you. Anyway, I'll catch you next week. Have a good weekend.